Welcome to Morning Infusion with Dr. V, where we are intentional about connecting you with entrepreneurs that have overcome and want to provide value to the audience. It's Dr. V here, where our coaching program teaches nurses to work from their computers anywhere around the world, making money and owning their own time, building their own profitable nurse coaching and consulting business. So today we have, and you know what? I always mess up your first name. So I'm just going to say Dr. McIntosh, and then you say your first name. Okay. Because, people mess up my first name all the time. And so I don't want to do that to you. Tell us, Dr. McIntosh, tell us a little bit about, just give us a brief bio of you.
Okay, so a little bit about me. I'm a mother, I'm a nurse. I've been a nurse for over 20 years, and I've worked in a variety of different settings to include the emergency nurse for quite some time, open step down, cardiac step down, open heart ICU. And then, of course, as a nurse practitioner for the last 10 years, I've been working in inpatient neurology. Um, just very involved from a social justice lens. I consider myself the advocacy nurse, and I became an advocate because I just saw so much going on in our community, but a lot related to human trafficking and how that impacted other areas of life, whether it was mental health, whether it was because you had food insecurities or mental illness or previous child sexual abuse. That really spearheaded some initiatives for me to step up and take action and start advocating around that. So that's just a little bit about me.
I love it. I love it. Now, tell us about nursing. Like,
Mm.
how did you become a nurse? Like, why did you even want to become a nurse?
Well, to be honest, my passion was really to initially become a lawyer. I've always wanted to be an attorney, and when I became I actually started my career as a home health aide. Then I became a certified nurse's assistant or CNA, and as I was working in the nursing homes, that's when I decided that I like nursing, and it gave me an opportunity to become that advocate, to talk to patients, talk to their family, and really try to improve outcomes as what I know it now on a lower scale. So that's what really piqued my interest more into becoming a nurse. And when I started doing the research and I found out that I did not need to have a political science degree to become an attorney if I wanted to go that route, I can just have a 4-year degree in anything. I said, well, nursing, because nursing is something that I'm really interested in. I could see myself advocating, and I could see how I could marry the two eventually. So that's kind of what started the journey for me.
Gotcha, gotcha, gotcha. So now you've advanced your degree. So you went from
Yes.
nursing,
Hmm.
and I'm assuming you got your master's. You didn't do
Uh-huh.
okay, got your master's, and then
Yes.
you went on to get your DNP.
Correct.
Now, tell me, what was the push to do that?
To go back for my DMP, well, I mean, I feel like I'm always on a quest to keep learning. Nursing is always evolving, so it's like to really learn more and to be able to give back in different ways of really educating other people. And I felt like it was one of those things where it's also another thing in your toolkit. It's having that additional education and being able to empower people through that. I thought was pretty it was a great thing. So the reason really for going back was definitely to learn more for myself, but the biggest thing, I got called to a stroke alert, and when I went down to see my patient, all they were describing to me was depression. And I said, well, we document a lot of the good physical care that we do after stroke, but we don't really talk about the psychological aspect. So in that moment, I had a project that I could do for my doctorate or my scholarly work. So I said, I really need to go back and really explore this on an organizational level and see if I can improve outcomes. And when I started doing my research with that, I found out that 1/3 of patients that have strokes, they have depression. Some of them have psychosis and anxiety and mania and various different things, post-stroke fatigue. and post-stroke anxiety. So it was just like, wow, we're not talking about these issues. So that was, I think overall, the biggest push for me to go back to say, okay, let me look at this problem, this clinical problem at the bedside bigger, and see if I can really impact the population with it. And from that, I was able to do a system-wide project. We were able to embed that the depression screening tool, PHQ-9, in the inpatient setting. And basically, my project was to screen patients before they went home after they had an acute stroke. And then that way they could follow up in an outpatient clinic, and if they were not improving with their symptoms, they could get medicated for depression. Now, some people say, oh, you just want to throw them on medication, but it wasn't that. What we know is that when we start them on medication, the outcomes is better. They have a better survival rate. They have better motor function improvement over time. People are willing to participate in their care, because you can imagine if you had a stroke and you're not motivated, then your symptoms are going to get worse because you're not going to therapy, you're not doing your exercises, maybe you're not eating adequately. And then that could just be another setup for another stroke. So it was just, it just one thing after another, it was just cycle. So, like I said, for me, it was really empowering to now realize that by organizing this, developing, implementing, and evaluating just this program, it could improve someone's outcomes. So that was the biggest thing
I
overall.
love that. I love that. I love that. Because one of the things most people don't realize that whenever you go and you get your PhD in nursing, you're doing a lot of research. But with your
Mhm,
DNP, this is the big difference. With your
mhm,
DNP, what you're doing is you are taking the research and you're pushing it into practice, because
mhm.
it takes about 10 years in order to translate it into practice.
Yep.
And so that I love how you implemented that so that you could, the survival rate of the post-stroke victim is a lot higher. So that's really good. I
Mhm,
love that. I absolutely love that. So now that you are in that space,
mhm,
today you are a big human trafficking advocate.
mhm,
So you told us why you became a human trafficking advocate. Today is Human Trafficking Day,
mhm,
where we focus on that. So tell us just some signs and symptoms, like how can you, because this is one thing that I struggle with, and I think
mhm,
that because we had a previous podcast where we talked about this.
mhm.
How can you determine whether someone, like if they're coming through the emergency department, how do you determine whether they are, they have human trafficking, like
So one of the biggest things, and it, like you said, specifically for the emergency department, and I'm glad you brought up the emergency department, because when you look at the literature, it's, that's oftentimes where many people frequent. So about 65% of the population often go to the emergency rooms, urgent cares. So you'll probably see them there more often. So when you think about what are you going to see, it's going to be different for every person. One of the main things is often that the story's inconsistent. Is this someone that's coming to the hospital, they don't have good follow-up, maybe they're hospital hopping, maybe they're using multiple alias in terms of the name that they're checking in with. Maybe they're presenting with someone that's totally in control of the conversation. Someone's dominating the conversation. You go to ask them a question, and this other person that came with them is constantly answering. That person is kind of hovering over them. They seemingly can't be alone with the provider, because this person is always there. Any move they make, the person's kind of like right on them, try to keep track of their whereabouts. You may see a lot of signs of sexual STDs, sexual trauma, physical trauma. Oftentimes, the patient may be kind of anxious or fearful, be very hesitant in answering some of your questions. They may not have their ID. They may not even know where they are, because sometimes with traffickers, they're very strategic and they will take you from state to state. So, maybe last week you're in Albany and today you're in Rochester, or you're in Buffalo, or maybe New Hampshire. So you don't really know where you are. So those are some basic signs, but oftentimes, the literature talks about poor eye contact. Well, it has to be in context, because if there's a certain culture, I mean, that could be their norm, that they're not making eye contact. So you can't just say, oh my God, they're not making eye contact, they're being trafficked. You have to put it in context of what's going on. And I always tell nurses, go with your gut, because oftentimes we get a sense of, okay, something's not making sense here. Something's not lining up. This person's, or maybe this is, let me back up for a minute. Sometimes what I'm seeing now is a lot of psychosomatic symptoms. Like, for example, patients may be coming in with seizure-like activity or belly pain, and when you do the workup, everything's coming back negative. And so it's just like, okay, why is their body manifesting in this way? Well, maybe there's some underlying trauma. So if people are coming to the hospital and they're for multiple things, multiple complaints, and their workup continually is negative, I would say take a step back and think about, okay, what else could be going on here? So,
So once you get that gut feeling, like
mhm,
how do you approach it though? What do you
right.
say? Because at the end of the day, and the reason why I kind of chuckled when you said that, because the workup is negative.
Mhm,
That's a good portion of the people that come into the emergency department.
mhm,
So
mhm,
when you have that gut feeling, or you think it may be, how do
mhm.
you approach it?
Well, the best thing is to try to get the individual by themselves, and understanding that human trafficking is hugely women and girls, but it can be men too, and definitely transgender, um, LGBTQ and I and A. So just being mindful that, and of course, when we think about recognizing it, like I said, you have to try to get the individual by themselves. And oftentimes, people are saying, well, how do you do that? Well, maybe you say, let's go to the bathroom for a urine sample. Let's go. Maybe the doctor or the or NP has ordered a X-ray, and you try to get them there by themselves, and then try to ask them that question. You know, Questions like, "Are you safe? Is someone intentionally intimidating you?" Um, or is anyone forcing you to have sex for anything of value, food? Because it doesn't have to be a money exchange. It could be, okay, maybe this, you're exchanging sex for a night on the couch or something like that. So really trying to get them by themselves, so you can kind of start opening that door and asking those questions. Are you safe? What's going on? I noticed this. When I ask you this, I notice this individual is talking over you or talking for you. Is there something going on? Other ways, is getting your healthcare team involved. Maybe you say, okay, I recognize that this may be something going on with my patient. Let me go have a huddle with the rest of the team, and get them to the side and say, okay, this is what I think is going on. And then maybe a matter of also calling the human trafficking hotline, but I would say having that conversation with them. um, Other things, the issue though is, if you even if they do disclose and say, yeah, I'm being trafficked. And oftentimes, I mean, individuals don't necessarily understand the word trafficked. That's a blanket statement that we use to describe what's going on, but they may think that they're just in a relationship with their boyfriend,
Mhm.
or they may have this confusion. So they don't even understand that this person is exploiting them. So you have to kind of use plain language to really explain to them, or just to kind of, get those questions out. So I would definitely say, if you can get them by themselves, that's going to be the best. So you can kind of get some more information and insight on what's going on. If that's not a possibility, connect with the team. Because even if they do say, yes, this is what's happening to me, I'm being exploited. If they're an adult over 18, they can say that they don't want the police called, they don't want any resources, and then it's just like, well, what do I do? I know this is happening. You can still make a report to the National Human Trafficking Hotline. Um, I would say, it does take about 12 or so minutes before you get someone on the line, or it did when I had initially called. But I would say still making that report and getting it kind of like on someone's radar. And just, being mindful of it. Even if people don't disclose, try to keep the door open because that individual may come back. And if you were warm and welcoming and they felt like centered them or empowered them or you didn't judge them, they may be willing to come back the next time. And then you may have someone disclose to you and they may be asking for help. But always give them the resources if they say, I don't want to be bothered, you know, um, no, it's too dangerous for me to leave right now. At least give them the resources. And one of the things that we did at our organization is that we wrote a protocol. We built the questions into our EHR, and it's system wide now.
Okay.
And now in the discharge instructions, everybody gets, it doesn't matter if, you screen yes or no, everybody gets some information about human trafficking in their discharge instructions.
Sweet. So typically, and I'm just assuming typically, whenever they come into the emergency department, they're coming in with someone else, right?
Oftentimes, yes, sometimes, sometimes not. You know, it may not necessarily be with the trafficker, but if the trafficker is trafficking other women or other men, they could sometimes they will send them as a way for them to keep an eye on, but then utilize their cell phone to kind of keep track as well, trying to figure out what's going on. So it doesn't always have to be that way, but yes, oftentimes someone does accompany them or keep tight track of their whereabouts via cell phone.
I think that this is opportune time right now, honestly, to really be able to identify those, because a lot of times, because of the time period in which we are now, a lot of ERs are not allowing people to come back as visitors. And
Right.
when they're not allowing them to come back as visitors, this is opportune time for the ER nurses to be able to really, really hone in and
Yes.
really recognize those people who are coming in.
Oh
So
yeah.
yeah, I love that. I love that. So I want to talk a little bit, because you are in the state of New York,
Hmm.
and we have this big old nursing strike going
Hmm.
on.
Yeah.
So, you've heard some stories. So we're gonna say allegedly here, okay?
Okay.
Because we don't really know what is going on, because you're not a part. Your hospital is not a part of the strike.
Correct.
But tell us what you've heard about the strike.
So allegedly, as
Allegedly.
you've said, what I'm hearing is that the ratios for med surge is 1 to 17. So one nurse to 17 patients. That's unheard of. I mean, typically, normal ratio maybe 1 to 6.
Right.
Some and make areas like California maybe 1 to 4. So when you talk about 1 to 17, that's almost 4 times the norm. Um, so that's one. In the emergency department, I'm hearing that the ratios are between 1 and 23 patients, one nurse to 23 patients in an emergency situation. And the thing of it is we're being told, or I'm hearing, that these patients are sick. They're critical. They're really sick. So even on the med surg step down unit, they really belong somewhere with higher care. But this is what's happening. Also hearing that they're very under resourced. I'm hearing that some of the travel nurses that are there, they want to even go on strike because of the working conditions. So like I said, that's all alleged, but this is what, so the conditions are just, people are understanding a little bit of why the nurses actually um, started the strike in the first place, that the conditions are very poor. The CEO is, my understanding is, coming onto units with bodyguards. So I'm not sure what they think that the nurses are going to do, but they're just wanting fair wages and safe staffing for their patients to improve outcomes. And when you have a ratio of 1 to 17, which is 4 times, or 1 to 23 in an emergency setting, you set the patient up for failure. I mean, you're not going to get good outcomes with that. Patients will not get the care that they need with that.
I think one of the things that we have to be very clear on as
Mhm,
it relates to that is that, because I remember when I first became a nurse,
mhm,
so we had 25 patients on this one unit, right?
mhm,
And I had a 1 to 12,
Uh-huh.
The other, because at that time I was an LPN and I had it was 1 to 12, 1 to 13
Wow.
ratio. And it was a med tele unit.
Mm.
And the RN it was two LPNs and one RN. The RN was like, well, I'm just checking. I need to check your orders to make sure that you're carrying them out right.
Mhm.
What are you talking about? Because ideally, what was supposed to happen was she was supposed to take the middle group, and so then it would be split 3 ways, but it was
Okay.
not. And I remember being a part of that organization
Mhm.
and refusing to take a patient assignment,
Mhm.
and them saying that I was being insubordinate for not taking that patient assignment.
Mhm.
And I remember thinking that I was going to lose my job
Mhm.
and being very tied to that job. And that's one of the reasons when I tell you that that is the reason that I wake up every single day to
Uh-huh.
serve nurses. That's one of the reasons,
Mhm.
because you have to have in order for you to have a sustainable wage, in order to make sure that your family is taken care of,
Mhm.
understanding that you don't have to put up with that. You don't
Correct.
have to put up with that. That is crazy.
Mhm.
And I think that patients, just as the general public, needs to be aware
Mhm.
that a 1 to 23. Now, I haven't worked med surgeon a long time, but when you said
Mhm.
1 to 17,
Mhm. Yes.
1 to 17 is ridiculous.
Yes.
Ridiculous. And then you're going to come into an acute care facility and you're going to have a 1 to 23 ratio in the emergency department where
Mhm.
we don't know what's going on with you when you first walk through that door. So
Correct.
we got to do some investigating. And so
Right.
we're going to investigate on
Mhm.
23 patients. That is
Mhm.
absolutely
Yeah.
ridiculous.
Mhm.
Absolutely ridiculous.
Mhm.
And so, and then the CEO walking around, allegedly walking around with 4 bodyguards, right?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
you say you don't know what the nurses would do. Well, I mean, I think I know what they would do.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that it is crazy.
Yeah. And how much did that cost? Like, how much are these bodyguards and these private drivers costing? And that's the thing. So you're sending this message. I mean, it's just, to me, it's just mind-boggling, that they nurses are being painted as these individuals that are greedy and just want all this money, and it's just like, no, you want to provide adequate, safe, accessible care to patients at a with an equitable wage. And taking care of 17 patients, and oftentimes when you're getting those orders, I mean, literally, like, every hour something is written. So imagine every single hour and trying to navigate 17 patients. Someone is not going to get the care. Many of them are not going to get the care. So it's just like, nurses, they want to work, they want to do the work, but they need to have adequate staffing so that the patients can get the care and have good outcomes.
And there is also more injury that happens
Mhm.
to the nurses whenever they can't take care of those patients.
Mhm.
And I don't think that people really understand. So I posted something the other day that someone tweeted, and what they tweeted was, about when Damar Hamlin, when he fell out on
Mhm.
the field. So for those of you who don't know, I think you're probably under a rock, because I ain't even I know, and I stay under a rock pretty much. But Damar Hamlin, he was a football player for the Buffalo
Mhm.
Bills. He ended up having a cardiac arrest after he was tackled during a football game.
Mhm.
He was taken to the hospital, and luckily he is doing amazing. He is
Mhm.
off ventilator, and he does not have an opposite brain injury because he can communicate effectively.
Mhm.
But a lot of people were talking about the how the trauma that was caused on the field
Mhm.
by watching him go into cardiac arrest.
Mhm.
But we have normalized nurses watching that trauma every
Mhm.
single solitary day.
Yep.
But not just that. It is not just them watching the trauma of patients going into cardiac arrest,
Mhm.
but it is the fact that I can't take care of this and I
Mhm.
don't have control
Right.
because you're giving me a 1 to 23 ratio or 1
Mhm.
to 17 ratio. So I
Mhm.
can't control it. And so now I feel like it's my fault
Right.
because you're saying that I should be able to handle this when the reality is it's not their fault. It should
Mhm.
not be something that they should be having to do. And
Mhm.
so now they have that more injury
Yep.
because they can't. And then it ends up causing psychological injury to the nurse, and the nurse
Mhm.
is going to be taken out anyway.
Mhm.
No, that's not, none of that is acceptable.
Yeah, and you're 100% right. And what's happened even during this whole pandemic is there's been an uptick in nurse suicide. So when you talk about the psychological consequences and feeling like, here I am, I'm supposed to be a nurse and I'm supposed to be helping patients, but there was this overwhelming sense that there's nothing more that I can do. I mean, you don't have the adequate staffing, you don't have the adequate resources. So you're between a rock and a hard place. And like you said, the nurses are taking that on. And then some of them are ultimately ending their life. And right, you're right. They talked about, I heard that conversation about, this was traumatic, seeing the CPR. But as you mentioned, yes, it's normalized for nurses. It's normalized for nurses to go in and code a patient and then go on to the next patient and just go back to, hanging your medication
And
and
they
and
talk,
not debrief and not think about it, and it's not supposed to affect you. You're just supposed to go on. And some of the general public feel like, well, this is what you signed up for. Yeah, but can we humanize each other? I mean, there is some humanity. I mean, we're supposed to be compassionate, and but we're not expected to also, it's just like we're supposed to be robots.
exactly.
Nurses aren't supposed to have any emotion. It's like, just get up and do the job and don't complain and don't say nothing negative about it and just keep going. And a lot of people are continuing to go and continuing to do the work, but that does not mean that, they also need a space created, a safe space for them to have conversations around this, so you are able to process and navigate these things. But what you mentioned is also gaslighting. You're supposed to be able to do this job. And it's just like, yeah, you're supposed to be able to do the job. And yes, you signed up to be a nurse, but you did not sign up to be overworked and, put your license at risk with unsafe staffing ratios. 17 patients for one nurse, 8 patients to one nurse, 3 or 4 patients in the ICU to one nurse is not safe ratios.
That's right. That's right. That's right. And so, of course, we think that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and
Mhm.
expecting a different result. And so we have taken a different route. And so
Correct.
you are an empowerment coach. And so tell us about your business and what you offer. Like, what do you offer to your clients?
Yeah, so my organization is McIntosh Advocacy and Consulting, and what I offer is really courses. I'm actually, like, I developed raw conversations, basically racism at work talks and discussions, because that's been a really big thing. Nurses, especially Black nurses, nurses of color, talk about, the issues about, microaggressions, racism in nursing. They also talk about medical racism, which is a whole nother conversation, but how all those things impact them. One of the biggest things that made me start this program too is also bullying. So I also help nurses navigate toxic workplace cultures or challenging workplace cultures, and navigate toxic bosses, because oftentimes, you're in this environment, you're trying to do your work, you end up working with people that berate you, gaslight you, disrespect you, and it's just like, how do you navigate that? It's like, these are some of the things that no one taught you in nursing school. So I offer a program with coaching. I offer a program to, help them develop patience during that process and really help them regulate themselves, because we can't control what everybody else does. We can't control how people view us, or just even treat us. So, but we can control our responses. We can control how it affects us physically and psychologically, and that's basically about taking your power back. You don't have, like you said, you don't have to be at this job that's basically putting you at risk. There's other alternatives. It's okay to walk away. It's okay to know your worth. So that's a lot of emotional intelligence I teach within my program. Effective communication, including written communication, because if it's not documented, it's not done right. And oftentimes we want to run to HR and tell HR how we're being mistreated in the workplace. And we have to remember that they work for the organization. So you have to, be smart about how you're documenting that information, because oftentimes if it's discriminatory, then you have a case. But if you didn't document adequately, then you run the risk of not basically not having the correct information, not knowing your rights. And so some of that I weave into my program as well. But then, like I said, very big on strategies. Okay, in the moment, being able to pause, being able to take that deep breath, being able to not respond in the moment, because you also want to keep your credibility. And people, it's that kind of thing, like first impression is the last impression. Even if you weren't the one, even if you're the victim in it, they're going to remember your response. They're going to say, well, see, this is what I'm talking about. This is how she responded to me. And that's what they're going to remember. So it's just like, okay, if you can keep your cool, if you can navigate this toxic workplace, then you're more in control. That is what you can control. That's what you can control. And the reason why I implemented this is because I was also facing a lot of the same things, bullying in my workplace. I would have the doctor calling me, like texting me at 6 in the morning when my shift doesn't even start till 8 o'clock, to tell me not to see patients. And when I wouldn't see those patients that he messaged me about, he would tell the physician assistant that I'm not seeing the patients. So it was kind of like this, you know, going through that, it was just like, okay, well, now I instead of responding to him, because if I respond to him, they're going to tell you the same thing. You're being insubordinate. He's your superior. So I said, okay, well, I can't engage like that. I have to figure out another way that I can exist in this space. And to me, it's like, okay, I really have to regulate. I have to make sure that when he says something, I don't respond immediately. Like, I really think about what the repercussions will be, because it's going to be heavier for me, because I have a lot of factors, being woman, being Black, there's already the stigma to say, okay, this is, she's going to respond as an angry Black woman. So there's all those factors that I'm kind of fighting in that process, because I don't want to be labeled as that, and I don't, so just really, like I said, specifically for Black women, that was one of the ultimate things that said, I really need to create something like this, for all nurses, but mostly I'm seeing it and experience it from my lens. And I know after experiencing it and implementing these strategies and being able to control myself and self-regulate, I see how the behavior shifted. So
Good. So now, how can everyone find you?
okay, so I'm on TikTok as the advocacy nurse. So you can reach me there. I'm also on LinkedIn, Celia McIntosh. You can find me there. You can also find me on Instagram at doc_McIntosh. And then I can also give you my email, drnurse58@gmail.com.
Sweet. I love it. So we have the Six Figure Nurse CEO conference that is coming up.
Mhm.
It's going to be February 24th and 25th. Dr. McIntosh will be in the room. Okay. So I encourage everyone to sign up. I encourage you to like and share this podcast. And if you have any questions about the Dr. McIntosh's program, please reach out to her, because she's excellent at what she does. Excellent, excellent, excellent.
Thank you.
So, again, if you, the Six Figure Nurse CEO Conference is coming up, so I can't wait to see you guys there. And you guys have a phenomenal rest of your day.